Hi, I'm Alara. I co-founded a tech company with my sister. We built it from nothing, and then she erased me, literally deleted my name from the founder documents. The day I found out, I was sitting in a boardroom and there wasn't even a chair for me. What would you do if your own family rewrote your legacy behind your back? Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from? And what would you call this? Betrayal or strategy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. It was supposed to be a regular quarterly board meeting, the kind that bored me to tears, but made me feel like the grown-up version of the little girl who used to build robots out of cereal boxes. Neuronova had come a long way from those initial days in my garage. Now it was a multi-million-dollar biotech firm, and I was its co-founder, or at least I thought I was. I arrived at the office 15 minutes early, like always. The conference room was already bustling with assistants, catered coffee carts, and those overly cheerful water bottles with lemon slices bobbing like they were on vacation. As I walked in, my heels clicking against the polished floor, I scanned the room and paused. Every seat was taken, 12 chairs, 12 name tags, none for me. I stood there waiting. Maybe someone would notice. Maybe someone would laugh and say, "Alara, there you are. We saved you a spot next to Serafina." But instead, Serafina looked up from her phone, blinked once, then turned to Caleb, our company's CFO, as if I were just another consultant passing through. "Looks like we miscounted," she said with a light laugh, tossing her hair back. Oops, oops. It was that kind of oops that wasn't really an accident. The kind that hits your stomach before it hits your brain. The room chuckled politely, then carried on. No one offering their seat. No one moving a muscle. I could feel my breath flatten as I swallowed the sting in my throat. "I'll stand," I said, keeping my voice even. I leaned against the glass wall, arms folded, pretending not to care. As the meeting droned on, I nodded at all the right times, took mental notes like I always did. But my mind was somewhere else entirely, somewhere in between disbelief and numbness. Was I imagining things? Was this just a mix-up, or had something shifted and no one thought to inform me? Afterward, as people filed out, I caught Serafina near the elevator. "You forgot to tell me I was no longer a founder," I said, my tone casual, but the words sharper than I intended. She blinked. "Don't be dramatic, Alara. It was just a seat. You know how chaotic these things get." Chaotic, right? The slide deck. I hadn't seen the agenda. I was never copied on. The subtle shift from inclusion to exclusion had been unfolding quietly, and I'd been too caught up in the work to notice. Back at my desk, I tried logging into the internal board files. Password invalid. Strange. I opened my email, scrolled through my inbox, and that's when it happened. An intern, fresh out of UT Austin, and probably on his second iced coffee of the day, forwarded me a copy of the investor packet by mistake. He must have thought I was still CC'd on approvals. I opened it and froze. The founder section was headlined with Serafina's name and photo. Below that, nothing. No trace of me, no credits, no story, no mention of the woman who pitched the first angel round from her living room couch back when our only asset was a half-baked prototype and a dream no one else believed in. Worse, I found a comment bubble in Serafina's handwriting. "Don't refer to Alara unless asked. Keep the focus on me." It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me without lifting a finger. My hands hovered above the keyboard, unsure whether to scream, cry, or slam the laptop shut. Instead, I took a screenshot, saved it, and backed it up to 3 separate folders. I didn't storm into her office. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't even reply to the intern. Instead, I drove home in silence, letting the Austin skyline blur past my window like a dream I was waking up from. Once inside my apartment, I changed into sweatpants, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, trying to be the picture of calm, and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. It was full of old photos. Me and Serafina at the first product demo. Me soldering our first circuit board. Me signing the incorporation papers. I clicked through each one slowly. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with clarity. They were erasing me. One meeting, one login, one name tag at a time. But I wasn't going to let them finish the job. I started backing up files, tracing everything I'd built, every code base, every document I'd signed, every decision I'd made when Serafina was still learning what series meant. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. They picked the wrong woman to write out of her own story. I didn't even remember clicking the file. It must have opened automatically. Or maybe my hands did it on their own while my mind was still grappling with what had happened in that meeting. The screen lit up with the pitch deck for our next investor round. A sleek, beautifully designed presentation with Neuronova's latest projections, team bios, and mission statements. Page by page, I scrolled. First, I skimmed the numbers. I already knew them by heart. I'd built half of them myself. Then I reached the leadership slide and everything in me stalled. There it was, Serafina's face. A high-res, polished headshot of her smiling, like she'd cured cancer herself under the bold caption, led by visionary founder Serafina Bundy. I blinked once, then again. Maybe it was a placeholder slide. Maybe they just hadn't finished the updates yet. Then I noticed something worse. Beneath her name was a paragraph I'd written verbatim. The language was mine, lifted from a memo I'd emailed last quarter. No credit, no reference, no footnote, and my name nowhere. I scrolled backward and forward trying to find myself as if I were a character in a book I'd helped write but no longer existed in. CTO gone. Co-founder replaced. Even the tech slide where I usually narrated our patent roadmap had been replaced with a demo of a neural chip I designed presented by someone else entirely. My body didn't shake. My voice didn't rise, but something in my chest uncoiled tight, deliberate, and ancient. I stayed up all night reviewing internal files. The next morning, still dressed in the hoodie I'd slept in, I drove to the office without even brushing my hair. I parked in my usual spot, walked past security, swiped my badge, green light. But when I reached my desk and opened my laptop, something was off. My email didn't load. My Slack login failed. I tried to access the internal server and a message popped up. Unauthorized access. Please contact your system administrator. I stared at the screen, called it. The guy stammered. Hi, Alara. Let me check with Ethan. Legal's been handling user roles. It's a compliance thing, I think. A compliance thing. That was rich. 10 minutes later, my fingerprint didn't open the lab. The same fingerprint that had been registered to our biometric system since day one, back when there were only 4 of us and we worked off folding tables and takeout containers. I walked down the hall, heart pounding, but face calm. No one said hello. One engineer actually turned his back as I passed. 2 interns whispered near the coffee bar. One of them whispering just loud enough. Wasn't she the one who started all this? My nameplate was missing from my desk. My favorite mug, the one that said code like a girl, was shoved into a communal bin along with a dozen others. The files I kept in a drawer gone. I sat in the chair motionless. I wasn't sure if I'd even logged into a real account or just occupied space. It felt like walking through the remains of my own house after someone had burned it down and dusted the ashes away. Nobody told me anything. No confrontation, no memo, just a slow bleed of identity, one credential at a time. I left without saying a word. The sun was already high by the time I got back to the parking garage. I sat behind the wheel, breathing into my hands, trying to decide whether to cry or scream. But nothing came. Instead, my eyes drifted to the rearview mirror. I didn't see someone defeated. I saw someone calculating. That garage was where I'd first called Serafina 3 years ago, the night we secured our first real round of funding. I remembered pacing between cars, breathless with joy, saying, "We did it together." Now sitting in the same spot, I whispered to no one, "They can't just erase me." But they were trying. Piece by piece, they were trying. I unlocked my phone and began typing a list. Names, timelines, contracts, everything I'd touched. Everything that had my fingerprints, real or digital. It was time to build a backup. Because if they were determined to lock me out of the system, I was going to make sure I held the keys to the story they thought they could rewrite. After leaving the office that afternoon, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly until I ended up at Zilker Park, a place I hadn't visited in years. I parked under the shade of a wide pecan tree and sat in the car for a long while. Engine off, windows cracked. The soft rustle of wind moving through the leaves was the only sound that didn't feel performative. No startup jargon, no curated bios, just air and silence. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes, letting the stillness take over. That's when the memories began to surface, uninvited, sharp-edged. I must have been 10. It was the district spelling bee. I had taken second place, 1 word away from a trophy. I'd walked up to Mom after the ceremony, holding my ribbon, flushed with pride. She gave me a quick pat on the head and turned to Serafina, who had bombed out in the first round. "You tried your best, sweetheart," she told her. You've always had the heart of a writer. I remember standing there, ribbon crumpled in my hand, wondering if maybe I'd done something wrong by winning. There were other moments, so many others, like the day of our first investor pitch, an event I planned down to the tablecloths and lighting. A reporter had asked Mom how it felt to have two daughters revolutionizing brain health. She'd smiled and said, "Serafina's always been the dreamer in the family. She sees the world differently." I had been standing right beside her. Back then, I told myself it didn't matter. We're sisters. That's what matters. I convinced myself it was just wording, habit, nuance. But now that eraser had a weight I couldn't shrug off. Now that same mindset had spilled into contracts, credits, access, and for the first time I realized this wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a carefully manicured hierarchy. I was the builder. Serafina was the brand. I stepped out of the car and walked to the nearest bench, still clutching my phone like a lifeline. The sunlight spilled across the lawn in soft golden streaks, warming my skin, but doing nothing to ease the chill that had taken root inside. I opened the camera roll and scrolled all the way back past holiday photos, client dinners, trade show floors until I reached the raw stuff. Me and oversized glasses hunched over our first makeshift EEG device, scribbled notes on white boards, stacks of circuit prototypes, late-night debugging sessions with pizza boxes on the floor. I stared at my younger self, sleep-deprived, focused, foolishly optimistic. This wasn't jealousy. This was grief. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I debated letting it go to voicemail, but instinct won. I answered, "Hi, Mom." Her voice was light, too careful. "Hi, honey. I've been feeling something's off between you girls. Did something happen?" I didn't respond immediately. She went on, "I know Serafina can be assertive, but she means well. You've always been more sensitive. Maybe it's just her time to lead." My jaw tightened. There it was again. Not just eraser, but justification. Serafina wasn't wrong. I was too sensitive. "Thanks for calling," I said flatly. "I should get going." "Alara, wait. Don't hang up. I'm just saying." But I'd already tapped end. I stared at the phone a long time, unsure if I wanted to throw it or cry. Instead, I just sat there listening to the laughter of a family nearby, their kids kicking around a soccer ball on the grass. It wasn't just betrayal. It was inheritance, generational, and I had carried it quietly for far too long. I pulled up my private Dropbox. For years, I'd stored snapshots, documentation of everything I'd built. Not because I feared betrayal, but because I believed in preserving progress. Now, those files became something else entirely. Proof. I started organizing them into folders. Design drafts, investor decks, original IP notes, prototype logs. They wouldn't define me anymore. I had built something real, something bigger than their narratives. And now I was done playing the understudy in a play I'd written. The night air hit differently after the park. Sharp, unsettling. I got home around 10 o'clock, tossed my purse onto the entry bench, and kicked off my shoes like muscle memory. My apartment was dim except for the soft glow under the kitchen cabinets. I hadn't even turned on the main lights yet when I heard it. The buzz of a phone vibrating against the granite countertop. I turned toward the sound. There it was. Caleb's phone still plugged in from the last time he stopped by to grab a few things he left. He never picked it up. Typical. I hadn't bothered to check before, and maybe I should have left it alone now. But tonight felt different. The screen lit up. A new message previewed in bright white font. "So we're all set then. Serafina gets founder credit and the Series B structure reflects that." The sender, Caleb's assistant. My entire body went still. I reached for the phone, not because I needed answers. I already knew what I'd find. I needed confirmation. I needed evidence. The passcode hadn't changed. Caleb always used the same 4 digits the year he graduated law school. How poetic. The messages opened with a tap. I scrolled back weeks, maybe even months. Conversations forwarded between Caleb and Ethan Sterling, our company's attorney. Legal drafts with annotations like, "Remove EB as co-founder on final doc," and "Clean transition plan for Serafina's sole leadership." It was worse than I imagined. There were references to Alara's emotional instability used as justification for my removal. A text from Ethan to Caleb read, "Use her hesitation during Q2 as leverage. You and Serafina need unanimous board tone before she figures out what's happening." And there it was. Proof that I wasn't just being nudged out. I was being erased surgically, strategically. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood frozen in the dark. Phone clenched so tight my fingers ached. Then came the final blow. A message from Serafina herself. Let her drift. If she wants to walk away, let her believe it's her choice. She always hated confrontation. That one did it. I hurled the phone across the room. It bounced off the carpet and hit the baseboard with a dull thud. I wished it had shattered. I needed something to break besides me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Not peaceful. Suffocating. I dropped to the floor beside the couch, knees pulled tight to my chest. For years, I'd bent myself into the shape of someone who keeps the peace, who sacrifices credit for the bigger picture, who lets things go for the sake of the team. But the team didn't exist. There was no we. There was only Serafina and the people she could control. I got up and walked to my desk. My laptop blinked to life. The files I'd backed up stared back at me from a single folder on the desktop. I renamed it Counter-Strike. Then I opened a fresh folder inside. This one I titled, They Forgot Who I Am. One by one, I began dragging documents into it. Emails, original pitch decks, metadata from my personal design files, early patent drafts I'd authored alone. I added board recordings, annotated meeting notes, drafts of internal memos. I wasn't building a case. I was building a timeline, a truth wall that couldn't be edited, couldn't be revised, couldn't be spun. I pulled out an old notepad, the kind with the Neuronova logo we designed during a midnight brainstorming session years ago. I wrote across the top in capital letters who stood silent. Underneath, I listed the names: Serafina, Caleb, Ethan. A few more I'd suspected but hadn't confirmed yet. Then I circled the top name, Serafina. It wasn't just about my stake in the company anymore. It was about the fundamental lie behind the brand they were building. A lie crafted with glossy photos and half-truths while the woman who soldered the first circuit board was painted as fragile. I wasn't going to scream for attention. I was going to become undeniable. I looked at the window. Reflected in the glass wasn't someone defeated, but someone reawakening. This time they wouldn't get to finish the story without me. We met at a quiet little cafe on the east side, the kind with exposed brick and overpriced pour-overs that tried too hard to be casual. Caleb was already seated when I arrived, his blazer folded neatly over the back of the chair, sleeves rolled just enough to look effortless. He stood when he saw me like old times, and smiled the same familiar polished smile he wore through our entire marriage. I figured something simple. I know you like the Ethiopian roast, he said, gesturing toward the second cup already waiting on the table. I didn't sit right away. I wanted to look at him. Really look. You helped Serafina rewrite the founder documents, I said calmly, my hands still at my sides. Didn't you? There was no twitch, no guilt, just a pause and a sip of coffee. It's not personal, Ilara, he finally said. It's just cleaner for investors. They want a clear narrative. And honestly, you've been emotional lately. That word. It slipped out of his mouth like he was doing me a favor. Emotional. He might as well have called me irrational, unfit, unstable. He didn't need to say those words. They were already hanging between us. I sat down slowly. Cleaner for whom? Caleb? I asked. The woman who built the tech you're now selling under her name? Or the team of cowards hiding behind NDAs and spreadsheets? He stirred his coffee, unfazed. This is business. You know how these things go. No one wants drama. My breath caught, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a visible reaction, right? And rewriting history isn't dramatic at all. We didn't speak much after that. He paid for both coffees like it meant something, like it balanced anything. That night, I went to a biotech networking gala I hadn't planned to attend. I wasn't in the mood for handshakes or champagne, but part of me needed to be seen. Still existed. I was halfway through a conversation with a VC from Houston when I heard my name from across the room. Serafina's voice, clear, smooth, rehearsed. Ilara. Oh, she was involved in the early stages, but she's mostly stepped back now. I've really led the growth phase. I turned slowly. She stood in a circle of men in suits, nodding, holding court like she'd been anointed. When her eyes met mine, she didn't flinch, just offered a slight smile like nothing was wrong. The man beside her glanced at me. I saw it. The flicker of recognition followed by confusion. Then pity. That one look hurt more than anything Caleb had said. I didn't stay long, just enough to let them know I saw them, that I was still there. The next morning, I opened my inbox and found a message flagged urgent from Ethan Sterling. Subject line, confidential settlement proposal. It was dressed up in legal polish. But I knew exactly what it was. They were offering me a severance. $500,000 to walk away. No lawsuits, no statements, no credit, no claim to the technology one co-developed or the company I co-founded. All I had to do was sign their NDA and disappear. They called it a courtesy, a gesture of good faith. I printed the document and took it to Melanie, my attorney. She read it in silence, pen tapping against her lip. Then she set it down and looked at me. "If you sign this," she said, "you'll never be allowed to say you were a founder. Not publicly, not in private deals, not even in interviews. They own the story. You'd be gone." I exhaled. "Then I'm not signing." Melanie smiled slightly. "That's what I hoped you'd say. Let them come." I stood up straighter. "Let's go on offense." For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was treading water. I felt like I'd planted my feet on solid ground. They thought I'd take the money. They thought I'd back down to avoid conflict. They thought the story could be bought. But the story was mine. I hadn't been back to a tech conference since all this began. But I'd co-organized this one nearly a year ago, long before the lies took root, before the betrayal became structural. So when I walked into the lobby of the downtown Austin Convention Center, I wasn't expecting applause or recognition, just a chance to reconnect, maybe even breathe. The place buzzed with the polished energy only women in tech events could manufacture. Smiling interns with tote bags, name badges clipped to lanyards, panelists rehearsing their sound bites in corners. I checked in, tucked my badge into my blazer pocket, and scanned the program booklet out of habit. Then I froze. Keynote speaker Serafina Bundy, founder and CEO of Neuronova. Founder. The word stared back at me like a slap. I flipped to the bio section, hoping for even a footnote. Nothing. No co-founder, no early team mention, no nod to the person who'd architected the damn neural stabilization framework she'd built her career on. It was like I'd never existed. And the picture, polished, professional, staged to perfection. Her arms crossed confidently beneath the headline. From garage to global, a visionary's journey. I didn't remember any garage. I took my seat in the main ballroom 10 minutes before the lights dimmed, sinking into the back row unnoticed. She walked onto the stage to scattered applause, her heels clicking confidently across the polished platform. "I still remember the night it all started," Serafina said into the microphone, voice buttery smooth. "Just me, a laptop, and an idea that wouldn't let go." She smiled. They clapped. Flash bulbs went off. The camera panned the crowd. I felt hollow. The worst part wasn't the lies. It was the admiration they earned her. People didn't just believe her. They wanted to believe her. She was the dream they needed. A clean success story. A woman who did it all on her own. I gripped the sides of my seat to keep from standing. It took every ounce of restraint not to scream. That was my laptop, my prototype, my sleepless nights. When it ended, I didn't approach her. I walked straight to the parking structure, not bothering to network or exchange cards. I sat in my car, shaking until the buzz of my phone snapped me out of it. A text from Melanie. "Call me. Urgent. Check your email." I opened the attachment. It was a new shareholder agreement submitted 2 weeks prior showing my voluntary relinquishment of founder status and full IP claims. The form was filled, dated, approved by Ethan Sterling and signed by me. Except I never signed it. I didn't even know it existed. The signature was digital, identical to one I'd used on a grant proposal 2 years ago. They had lifted it, pasted it, faked it, and submitted it as legal consent. I sat motionless for a full minute before I could even dial. When Melanie answered, her tone was clipped and furious. "We pulled metadata. That signature came from a scrubbed document in the legal archive. Someone forged your name, Alara, and they used it to wipe you out." Something in me snapped clean. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I drove home, changed into sweats, opened my laptop, and began building the full digital trail. The original designs, timestamped Slack chats, early patent filings with my name and ID embedded in the code, a copy of the pitch deck I'd written line for line before Caleb refined it, my calendar entries, my emails. I organized it all in a new folder labeled simply Proof. Then I opened my contacts and found the name I'd buried months ago. Sophia Rossi. She was a tech journalist who once offered to profile Neuronova when we were nobodies. Back when I was still considered one of the brilliant women behind the brain tech boom. I hit call. She answered after 2 rings. Sophia, it's Alara Bundy. You wanted a story. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. There was a pause. Wow. I haven't heard your name in a while. Thought you'd gone dark. I didn't go dark. I was buried. I'm done being quiet. She said nothing for a beat. Then you've got my attention. I've got more than that, I said. I've got evidence, names, timestamps, and a forgery. You ready to go on the record? I looked at the blinking cursor on my screen, already halfway through a draft titled, The Truth About Nuranova. Absolutely, I said. But I'm not just telling my story. I'm about to rewrite theirs. They weaponized silence. That was their strategy. Erase me quietly and let the world forget. But the moment Sophia's article hit the homepage of TechPulse, their silence detonated. The founder you never knew. My name was everywhere. The article had it all. Side-by-side photos from the early lab days, scans of my handwritten notes on the neural interface prototype, email headers proving I'd registered our initial patents, and a direct quote from me. They didn't erase me. They tried, but I archived everything. By noon, my inbox was flooded with interview requests. By dinner, my name was trending on Twitter. #Alara was there, where I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open, phone buzzing nonstop. A friend from Stanford forwarded a post from a Nuranova engineer who'd commented anonymously on Reddit. We always knew she built the codebase. Serafina just handled the pitch decks. Serafina, in her usual PR gloss, issued a damage control statement hours later. Nuranova is a collaborative achievement. We're proud of our entire team. A lie that sounded like unity, but it was too late. That night, I received an anonymous email. No subject line, just a message from a burner address and an attachment labeled, "Thought you'd want to see this." Inside were screenshots, leaked internal threads between Caleb and Ethan Sterling. Caleb used the 2021 signature. She won't notice. It's just a cleanup for legal. Ethan, let's finalize phase 2 this week. Transition narrative has to stick before arbitration. Caleb, she won't make it that far. She folds under pressure. They were planning this for months. Step by step, erasing me wasn't accidental. It was strategy. And the email, a gift from someone inside who knew the truth had to surface. I forwarded everything to Melanie. I don't care how friendly their tone is, I told her. We're going for arbitration. Full transparency. No deals. She didn't hesitate. We'll file by morning. We've got enough to light the whole thing up. 2 days later, I walked into the arbitration hearing wearing the same navy suit I wore when we pitched Nuranova's seed round. The panel included 2 investors and 1 neutral mediator. Caleb sat stiffly across from me. Serafina wore a white blouse like she wanted to look innocent. Ethan barely looked up. Melanie opened with documentation, patent timestamps, project logs, internal Slack messages. Then came the forged signature breakdown, metadata trails, data stamped files, comparison charts, and finally the big one, the audio clip. In the recording, Serafina was speaking at a brunch 2 weeks ago, laughing. I didn't lie. I just cleaned up the story for clarity. Investors don't care who sketched the original diagrams. They care about the one who sells it best. When the clip ended, no one spoke. Serafina blinked twice. Caleb stared at the floor. The board called for a recess. Outside in the hallway, Melanie handed me a folder. They're going to offer you money. Big money. You sure you're ready to say no? I'm not doing this for a payout, I said. I'm doing this so the little girl in me who stayed up soldering circuit boards in the garage knows she mattered. When we returned, they were waiting with a proposal. $3 million, clean settlement, NDA, walk away. I stood. I didn't look at the papers. You can't buy what you already stole, I said. I want credit. I want the patents back in my name. I want the truth to be public. And I want them, I pointed to the trio, to answer for it. The mediator took notes. Caleb sighed. Serafina's jaw clenched. You'll regret this, Ethan muttered under his breath. No, I said. You will, because I wasn't asking anymore. I was reclaiming. It wasn't about theatrics. It wasn't about revenge. When I stepped into that ballroom at the TechFront conference, it was about reclamation. The room buzzed with anticipation. The Nuranova banner hung behind a sleek stage, LED panels glowing in rhythmic pulses of violet and steel blue. I walked slowly past tables of biotech execs, startup founders, and venture journalists. People who had once applauded me, who now barely recognized me. They turned when I passed. Some whispered. Serafina was already backstage. Her team milled around near the teleprompter, prepping for her keynote address. The final announcement loomed on the screens. Serafina Bundy, visionary solo founder of Neuronova. The lights dimmed. Applause rose like a programmed wave. But before the first word left her mouth, the stage screen flickered. A sharp cut, then black. Murmurs erupted, and then the title flashed in bold white letters on a charcoal background. "Where is Alara Bundy?" Gasps sliced through the air. A photo appeared. Me in the garage lab soldering the first neural node. Then another. My notes, whiteboard formulas, my name circled in Sharpie. Then came a flood. Time-stamped emails, early schematics, team photos where I stood in the center. The piece de resistance was a short clip from an old TEDx panel. Serafina answering a question. "Oh, Alara built the core. I just pitched the vision." Her voice echoed across the stunned room. I stepped forward from the aisle, climbing the stage. The staff was too shocked to stop me. Serafina froze behind the podium, her smile faltering like a glitching hologram. I didn't touch her, didn't look at her. I faced the crowd, took the mic from its stand, and inhaled. "My name is Alara Bundy," I began, "co-founder of Neuronova. I built our first functioning prototype on a kitchen table. I filed the original IP claims. I hired the founding engineers. I funded our first lab with my savings account." Silence. Then I was erased. I paused, letting the weight of it settle. I'm not here to drag anyone through the mud. I'm here because truth matters. History matters. And the women who build things deserve to be seen, not just used and discarded. Scattered applause grew into a wave. People rose from their chairs. Cameras flashed. A journalist in the second row shouted, "Why now?" I looked straight at her. Because justice never arrives early, but it always arrives. As I stepped off stage, the applause chased me. Backstage, security finally snapped out of their trance, but I raised a hand. "I'm leaving," I said. "No trouble." Then, as I passed the green room hallway, a voice called out from the corner, "Alara." It was Liam O'Connell, one of the original software engineers who'd left Neuronova last year without warning. He approached, awkward at first. "I left because of what they did to you," he said. "They blacklisted anyone who defended you, but I archived every line of your neural net framework. It's all yours if you want it." I blinked, stunned. "I'd testify too if you need me." I shook his hand, gratitude swelling like a tidal wave in my chest. "Thank you, Liam. You have no idea what this means." "I think I do," he said. "They forgot something, didn't they?" I smiled. "They forgot who built the damn thing." That night, I walked into my home, poured a glass of Malbec, and opened the Neuronova financial interface. My access still worked. I hovered over the transfer button. $5 million. With a few keystrokes, I moved it. Every cent I had personally invested, gone from their reach. After sending the final transfer confirmation to my bank, I sat back in my chair. No champagne, no cheers, just the quiet click of my laptop as I shut it for good. My $5 million was no longer tied to Neuronova. And with it, neither was I. I emailed the board my formal notice. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing all financial involvement in Neuronova. This company will no longer carry my name nor my burden. No sign-offs, no sentiment, just truth. I didn't check for replies. That same afternoon, I received a link forwarded by 3 different contacts. Serafina's apology had just gone live on the company's site and was already trending on LinkedIn. I deeply regret failing to credit my sister Alara Bundy, whose vision co-founded Neuronova. Her contributions will now be fully acknowledged in all official company records. Every word had the synthetic gloss of a PR team, not a single drop of real remorse. Still, it existed. Her public mask had cracked. I took a screenshot and archived it. Not for court, not for social media, just for peace. Peace. Finally, later that week, I moved into my new studio space. A converted brick loft downtown, minimalist and sunlit. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A whiteboard stood waiting in the corner, already dotted with ideas for a new venture. Not revenge-driven, just driven. I caught my reflection in the mirror as I walked past, paused, and looked myself in the eye. The same eyes that had once stared into that same mirror years ago on the night before my first pitch. And just like back then, I whispered, "You are not invisible. You never were." That whisper turned into a vow. The following month, I was invited to speak at a startup accelerator in Austin. 150 young founders in folding chairs, notebooks open, eyes wide with hunger and hope. I shared the sanitized version of my story. No names, just lessons. Protect your name, I said. Build your legacy. And if anyone tries to take it, don't just fight back. Reclaim it with grace. The room was still. Then came the applause. Afterwards, a young woman with curly hair and trembling hands approached me. "I almost gave up last year after my co-founder tried to shut me out. But then I read about you. You saved me years of silence." I held her gaze and simply nodded. Some victories echo louder through others. In the months that followed, justice arrived, not in grand gestures, but in quiet closures. Ethan Sterling was dropped by 2 top-tier law firms. His name no longer opened doors. Caleb's firm lost its biggest contract with a California hospital. Investors called it a confidence issue. I called it karma. And Serafina, she released a bland video stepping down as CEO to explore new opportunities. Her eyes didn't shine. Her voice was clipped. The damage wasn't just professional. It was personal and irreversible. Still, not everything was wrapped in neat bows. One afternoon, I passed by this cafe on 2nd Street, the one Serafina and I used to visit during the early days. The barista who once remembered our orders was gone. In our old spot by the window sat 2 sisters laughing over iced lattes, their heads thrown back in carefree joy. I watched them from the sidewalk for a few moments. No jealousy, no bitterness, just recognition. Some wounds don't scar on the skin, but they shape your steps forever. And yet here I was, still walking, still building, still me. They tried to erase my story, but instead they helped me rewrite it in ink that can never be deleted. At its heart, this was more than a tale of betrayal. It was a journey of reclaiming identity in the face of deep-rooted family drama. Sometimes the loudest battles are the ones fought in silence within our own bloodlines. Have you ever felt pushed aside by the people you thought were on your side? Drop a comment. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. If this kind of story moved you, hit subscribe so you won't miss the next powerful chapter. Because truth, justice, and healing, they always deserve the spotlight.